Let's speak now about what's happening this half term. It's a wonderful half term holiday for the kids, not allowed to go anywhere, not allowed to meet with more than just one other child outside their home, not indoors at all, despite the fact that for most of us it's going to be chucking down with rain all week. Brilliant. But obviously there are other bigger worries for some families, and that's about, frankly, not going hungry, as of course children no longer entitled to the free school meals during term time, those vouchers, and different councils taking over the cost of preparing the help for those families. But what is actually happening on that front? Well, let's talk to Kate Green, who's Labour's Shadow Education Secretary. She joins us now. Good morning, Kate.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. And your concern today is that we are looking at a postcode lottery when it comes to getting support for food for children during half term. What's happening?
Yeah, that's right. So although the government has now introduced a holiday programme of activities and support for children who would get free school meals in term time to have food during the holidays, it hasn't put that in place for half term, saying instead that this half term parents can go to the local authority, to their winter support grant, and apply for extra help. There are a couple of problems with that, Julia. First of all, that fund isn't just for school food. It's got a number of demands on it. So, of course, it's possible that by the time parents go and ask for financial support to buy food for their children, that money will all have been used up. And the other problem is that the government's own guidance to local authorities about this fund is that it's not to be used to replace or replicate school food programmes. So we're getting some really contradictory messages from the government there. I don't know why they think children won't need to eat in the half term in the same way as they will in the Easter or summer holidays, and why they won't just put in place a proper programme right through this pandemic to make sure that children on free school meals are protected and can have food provided for them during half terms and in Easter, summer and Christmas holidays too.
I can't imagine there's anybody who can sleep at night who wants to know that any child in this country is going hungry when they go to bed because their parents can't afford to buy them food. However, in a normal year, there'll be parents who are, living on universal credit, living on the most basic benefits, on minimum wage, who are still expected to feed their children during half term, during winter, during summer holidays, when they're not eligible to get school meals, free school meals during the normal term time. So what is different now? Explain to us what's different now that children need to be helped with access to food during the holidays.
Yeah, sure. So obviously in the middle of a pandemic, it's much, parents have fewer options. We already know that unemployment is much higher, 1.7 million working age adults currently, and we expect that number to rise, sadly, over the next few weeks as the economy begins to open up, but many jobs and industry sectors are not able to recover. So I think the financial pressures and the options for parents are much more constrained during the pandemic than they would be in normal times. As you know, Julia, too, we are also concerned that as things stand, the £20 increase in universal credit that the government put in place last year is due to run out in just a few weeks' time, and we still don't know that it's going to be continued. So parents are really already very concerned about the future. They're struggling to set any money aside for the possibility that they might see their incomes reduce in just a few weeks' time. And I think, we're just in a period of acute uncertainty for families, and it's right that we should give them that extra support during these half-term holidays.
It is the case, is it not, that our benefit, the lowest benefits you can be on if you've got a family in this country is considerably lower than most of Western Europe?
Yeah, we have a particularly mean social security system. And of course, over the last 5 years, we've seen a number of very significant cuts to the benefits that specifically support families with children. So things like the benefit cap disproportionately affects a family with children. Similarly, the freezes on child benefit, obviously, are going to have affected parents on low incomes who rely on that money to help meet the costs of raising their children. So it's not just that our system is meaner, you're right, it is, but also that it has been particularly parents with children who have lost out from some of the austerity measures of the last 5 years. And that's why we've seen child poverty sadly rise in this country, now at 4.2 million children in poverty. And if this universal credit cut takes place next month, if this £20 uplift is removed, we know that we expect to see another 400,000 children put into poverty as a result of that.
Well,
so it's really important that we protect parents' income so that they can properly provide for their children.
Put into relative poverty. I mean, it's we're not talking about children, going barefoot on scrap heaps like in India, desperately trying to forage for food. I mean, let's have a reality check about this. But I'm very much in favour of the benefit cap on the child benefit freeze, things like that, because able-bodied, unless people are entitled to disability benefits, and absolutely I want people to be able to live a comfortable life. If you're able-bodied and you've got kids, maybe you should go out and get a job. Now, that was fine until March last year. The trouble is people can't mostly go out and get a job. There are still jobs available. By the post office hiring, by the way, the delivery companies, there are still jobs, but there aren't enough to go around. We know that, so we do need extra help now. But those measures were brought in. They were very popular, even among Labour voters, Labour supporters like those measures, because actually, these people were able-bodied. You're struggling on benefits and you're able-bodied and you've got 4 kids. Well, maybe you should go out and get a job or not have 4 kids, with what most people, I think, listening right now would say. But I understand things are different now. However, you want more help for these families. Isn't the thing that what these families really want is not state charity or anyone else's charity from a food bank? What they want is to be able to get a job. They want to be able to go out to work. They want to have their lives back. And yet Labour supports lockdown.
I absolutely agree that people would much rather be working in all circumstances, in a pandemic or in normal times, to support their families. Nobody wants to be out of work and having to rely on benefits.
Some people do. Some people do. Well, I know people myself who do it. So.
Well, I think, it's a pretty foolish choice to make because, as you've rightly said, the benefits are so ungenerous. What we also know, of course, is that circumstances change. And, when you choose to have your children, you don't know that there's a pandemic coming around the corner. You might not know that a partner is going to leave. You might not know that you're going to become seriously ill yourself. So I think it's important we keep that safety net.
Absolutely.
And it is mean. And in the pandemic, as you say, the ability to find a job that's going to pay sufficiently, that's going to be secure. There are very many short-term and 0 hours jobs, as you know, Julia, not great if you're trying to plan a family budget and make sure that you can properly look after your children. Of course, work should be a route out of poverty, but, the majority of children growing up in poor families, even before the pandemic, were in families where an adult was working.
When an adult, if you've got 2 parents and one adult's working 2 days a week, funnily enough, they can't afford their bills. Well, what a shocker. Work 5 days a week, or 2 parents working a lot.
No, I think that's not quite correct.
That is true. I've looked at the figures in great detail.
Yeah, well, as you know, I've spent 20 years looking at the figures, and, there are a mix of circumstances.
You can't say a family is a working family when you've got 2 parents and one of them works 2 days a week. It's a load of nonsense.
You also can't expect parents to be able to work full-time if, for example, they're looking after a disabled child or having also to compare.
Disability benefits should be greater. Absolutely. I've got no issue with that. We're talking about able-bodied families, able-bodied parents who let's stop the pretense that you're in poverty. If you're both working, you're not in poverty.
You're quite right. In a couple family, if both parents are working, you're much less likely to be in poverty. In a single parent family, you don't have that option. If one of you isn't able to work full time because you need to care for your children or perhaps for elderly relatives, then it's going to be difficult for both parents to be working. There are all sorts of complicated circumstances, is what I'm trying to say. And of course, nobody thinks that it's children that should lose out as a consequence of their parents' decisions.
I think we can end on a note of agreement on that front, Kate. I'm going to briefly get you on the issue of the lockdown there. Does Labour actually, I mean, it's difficult to tell on any different day, does Labour actually have a policy and a decision yet on when we should come out of lockdown?
I think it's difficult for us to give you the clear answer you would like, Julie, on that, for a number of reasons. First of all, I think we have, in our view, seen lockdowns released too quickly last year, with the result that, of course, the R and the level of hospitalisations and tragically deaths then began to rise again.
Which lockdown?
Well, the one that ended at the beginning of December, which was
Wait a minute, Labour endorsed a 2 or 3 week lockdown. It lasted a month. You wanted it to last longer than the length you wanted it to be?
But what then happened was that we got the lockdown released in December, and immediately there were proposals for an extended Christmas break, and we saw, of course, that the mixing that took place during December drove a big rise in infections.
Christmas, there was no post-Christmas spike that was attributed to Christmas mixing. That's been proven.
What we've seen in January, as you know, what we've seen in January is a rise in infection, in hospitalizations, tragically in deaths. We don't want to be in that position again. So what I would say to your question, to answer your question, is we want a cautious removal of the lockdown, a staged removal of the lockdown. We want to see the data that the government is relying on and to know the basis on which it's taking decisions. Is it about reducing community transmission? Is it about reducing hospitalizations and making sure that we understand why they're taking the measures?
Schools back on March the 8th. You're the Shadow Education Secretary. Schools back on March the 8th, all of them?
I'm desperate to see all children back in class as soon as possible. I really hope we'll be seeing children going back to school on March the 8th. I would keep all options on the table about whether it might be necessary to have a staggered return or rotas for a time, but I very much hope we'll see all children back in class as soon as possible, on March the 8th or as soon as possible thereafter.
Okay.